Well. Welcome back, my friends and family. Thanks for joining us. This is the West Best Media. And today, this is the last episode on South Africa, Malema, and Ramaphosa. Here is part four, the West Nightmare losing the Southern Belt. This isn't the conclusion of the Battle of South Africa. Yeah, in fact, this is the conclusion of the battle for South Africa. If you missed part one, two, three on my three-part breakdown on Malema conviction, go back and catch them. They show you how this fight began and why it's now bigger than one man. Subscribe and stay with me because this is the West's greatest fear, losing the southern belt of Africa. The southern belt equation: South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique is the mineral engine of the continent. Platinum, cobalt, copper, gold, diamond, rare earths, mineral, everything, everything the 21st century economy needs. For over a century, this region has powered Western industry and technology, but none of that wealth built homes, hospitals, or schools for people who mind it. Now, with leaders like Malema demanding value added processing, the West faces something it never prepared for: Africa setting its own prices. That's the beginning of the end of cheap empire. And here's the domino effect. It's starting with one country breaking ranks: Zambia renegotiating its copper contract, Zimbabwe rejecting IMF dictates, Namibia imposed new export rules for critical minerals, Botswana partners directly with African nations instead of European cartels, and then South Africa and the Pan African leadership connected all. Now you have a southern belt that trades inward, not outwards, that keeps wealth circulating on the continent instead of leaking to offshore accounts. That's not economy, that's decolonization through trade. If you believed African resource should build Africa first, hit like, share this message right now. And let's get into the end of cheap mineral and cheap labor. For centuries, the West has controlled Africa through price, buying our resource for pennies and selling them back like finished goods for dollars. That's why they fear Pan Africa economical bloc. because the minute Africa processes its own copper, its own cobalt and platinum, Western industries loses their cost advantage. And the minute that happens, you'll start seeing the breakdown of the West. That's what the Southern Belt represents, not just mineral power, but moral power. It says no more slave prices, no more colonial profits. Let's look at the map. The Southern Belt, it's between the Indian and the Atlantic Ocean, two ship lines that carry most of the world trade. You control that corridor, and Africa control its destiny. Ports in Durban, Walvis, Port de Bay, Mantuka could serve the entire continent. New rail lines could link the Sahara to the sea. Africa goods made by African hands, shipped on African terms. That's not fantasy, that's logistics. And that's what the West cannot control. And that's why they cannot afford to lose the Southern Belt. If you want to see Africa rise, own its own ports, its railways, its rail lines, its future, comment below and share this episode everywhere. The final reason the West is panicking is simple: time. African medium age is 19. Europe is 44. The youth in Africa is awakened, connected, and unafraid. They're not scared of sanction or foreign approval. They grew up on truth, not on propaganda. They seized through colonial aid, debt traps, and fake democracy. And they follow leaders like Malema, Traore, Goita, Faye, not because they are perfect, but because they are free. The Southern Belt isn't an economical zone. It's the front line of a generation revolution. Now look at the inevitable collapse of control. The West's nightmare isn't losing trade deals, it's losing influence. Once Africa control its wealth, its people, its political, its policies, no Western government can dictate its future. The empire that once ruled through banks, borders, collapsed under the weight of Africa unity. So let's close this four-part series with the truth. The West doesn't want fear. The West doesn't fear Malema anger. No, they fear Africa awakening. That's their biggest fear. Because once South Africa unite with its neighbors, the Southern Belt becomes the backbone of a free continent. Subscribe now, and if you missed any episode or the original three-part Malema Conviction series, go back now and watch it. Each one connect to this moment. Each one tells you the story of the rise of Malema, why the West fear him most. This is the West Best Media. Straight talk, no sugarcoating. Again, please subscribe, share, and drop a comment. Let us know what you're thinking. Let's keep the conversation going. Africa is rising. Babylon is falling. Peace out. One love.